Awesome. All right, so welcome everyone. I'm really excited to have all of you join us for a panel on media literacy. This is Media Literacy Week, which is run through the National Association of Media Literacy Education in partnership with UNESCO. So it's actually a global effort to raise awareness about media literacy skills. So we wanted to have you all have the opportunity to also increase your media literacy skills. So before we get started, I would like us to take a moment and just think about the lands that we're on. So as we begin this event, we acknowledge the original inhabitants of this area, the Menominee and the Ho-Chunk nations. This land encompasses the 3 campuses of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in the Lake Winnebago region. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor these ancestral grounds and celebrate the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. All right, thank you. I stopped sharing my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
I switch back and forth between Teams in the browser and Teams in the app, and it feels very different functionally. Okay, so we are going to start with introductions. I'm going to serve as sort of the moderator and add in to the discussion. And so my name is Alicia Johnson. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I direct the Women's Center here at UW Oshkosh. And I also teach in our Women's and Gender Studies program. And I'm very excited to have these wonderful folks who we are very fortunate to have on our campus as experts. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Sara, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Sara Hansen. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the chair of the Department of Journalism. In the Department of Journalism, we have programs in multimedia journalism, advertising, and public relations. And I'm lucky enough to have worked in all those fields before becoming a professor. So I've worked in those fields, and I've been a part of UW Oshkosh for about 10 years. And I teach advertising and public relations primarily in our world. And I also research in activism in social media and brand image making in politics lately. So it's kind of interesting. There's so much going on in this field. So I'm happy to be with you all today.
Thank you. And Tony?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Palmeri. I'm a professor of communication studies in the Department of Communication. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I've done some academic research on media over the years, but I think the perspective I bring to this is over the many years, I've been at UW Oshkosh since 1989. I've also been a media practitioner in addition to being a critic. So throughout the 90s and early 2000s, I did quite a bit of public affairs, television shows, I did radio. Today I maintain a blog. It's called Tony Palmeri's Media Rants. It's media criticism. I write a column for the Oshkosh Independent called State of the State. And I just began a new podcast with one of my former students, actually, named Matt King. We call it Running on MT, and we do kind of like culture and politics in it. And what I found over the years is that when I'm doing my own media work, I'm under no pressure to make money from it. I'm nonprofit. And so my goal has always been to try to raise the bar for discourse. And I think that's what all media should do. But there is a powerful profit motive in our corporate media. And I wonder if that becomes one of the reasons why we have so much misinformation, but we can get to that later. So that's who I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ted?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ted Mulvey. I am the information literacy librarian at Polk Library on the main campus. My pronouns are he, him, and his. My main job is to help students to research whatever they might have with their classes or personally. I also help faculty and staff, but as far as from my perspective, information literacy, the big part is evaluating information, and that's specifically to help students to be able to evaluate information, not only just for their academic assignments that they might have, but also just anything that they might encounter in their personal and their civic lives as well. So I'm kind of coming at this from a perspective of really thinking about how we evaluate information and how it applies to our everyday lives.
Excellent, thank you. So the structure is going to be that we're going to go through a couple of questions with the panel, and then we are going to close out with a Kahoot quiz with Leo. So I don't know, Leo, do you want to jump on and introduce yourself quick?
Yeah, I can do that. My name is Leo Costello. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I graduated from the journalism program at UWO in December of last year. And I'm currently working at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel under a fellowship program to help them with their election coverage. And my job is to basically monitor the internet for questions people have about voting, and also look for misinformation that's being spread and fake news. And part of my training, the fellowship I'm in is run by a company called Harken. And during my training, we took this this Kahoot quiz, a fake news game show quiz, that was really informative about being able to, it was a good exercise on spotting fake news in terms of like what is a reliable news source when you're consuming information on the internet, because it's so easy to make information look real. And I was walking on campus to the convenience store one day, and I saw a poster for this event, and I thought that the fake news game show would be a great addition to this. So I sent an email out, and I got a hold of the quiz. So we'll be doing that. And I think it's an optional thing to stick to the quiz, but I thought it was pretty fun when I took it. And I don't know, maybe the group hosting this can give a prize away to the winner or something. Although that's not on me. But we can see. I think it'll be fun. So stick around.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sometimes I feel like, we get bombarded with so many messages and email and posters. So I was really excited when Leo reached out because of the poster. I was like, yes, there is a reason why we're still doing posters. So just a kind of fun side note. Okay, so we are talking about fake news, and it's always good practice to define the terms that we're talking about. So what is fake news? Dr. Palmeri already mentioned misinformation and disinformation, and there's a term called malinformation. So can you all help us understand what those terms are and what constitutes fake news?
Sure, I'll start, I guess. So as you mentioned, we have the three kind of main categories there. With misinformation, you're looking at the news that isn't necessarily going to be as malicious. A lot of times with misinformation, you're finding things that aren't specifically intended to deceive. So it might be shoddy reporting, it might be outdated information that accidentally gets widely disseminated, but by and large with misinformation, it's not necessarily going to be something that's really intended to deceive, where with disinformation, usually I kind of categorize that in almost pretty much 100% false. So it's trying to promote a particular agenda, but not actually real. It's true. I guess for work. Information much more with malicious intent, where the information might be genuine, but it's put out there to kind of advance a particular agenda. One thing immediately that comes to mind that's a good example of malinformation might be when the emails were leaked by I don't remember who leaked them, but for Emmanuel Macron, the French president, when he was up for election, they leaked these things like right before there was a media blackout coverage before polling. And that would be a good example of malinformation, people trying to actively harm an election with kind of a last minute thing. The content might have been genuine, but it was done with malicious intent.
I can jump in. I'd like to start off. Alicia Johnson started off this session with a land acknowledgement of the Native population, and for the students on this session, you should see a book by James Loewen, Loewen, called "Lies My Teacher Told Me," and he has a quote in that book. Historically, American Indians have been the most lied about subset of our population. I mean, it's hard to find another culture that has been more of a victim of disinformation and malinformation. And today, in modern times, fake news, that concept has changed. I mean, President Trump has kind of redefined it as fake news is any kind of journalism that he cannot control. And unfortunately, all other politicians have now started to use fake news that way, which has almost made the concept somewhat meaningless. It's been so thoroughly weaponized. When I was a kid, long time ago, fake news meant the National Enquirer, or it meant like a Saturday Night Live, like an ironic kind of show that makes up news. But now in the social media era, we do have a very highly politicized, willful attempt to distort news and to divide us against each other, to make us almost hate each other. And we certainly have seen that going on in the presidential campaign. We see it in many other issues also. As this session goes on, we'll talk about some ways to get around that. So, in summary, I don't think the concept of fake news is new. I do think, unfortunately, it's become weaponized in a way that has made the term almost lose its power. So I'll stop there.
And I can build a little bit upon that great information that's so far. So we look at news media to inform society. That's the basics of journalism school, and that's what's being taught. That's what the expectation is. But Tony is right. There's been a weaponization of that when you start to cast bias or information that you don't want to see heard, that becomes labeled as fake. There's always been mistakes in the media, and there's always been, we could argue, bias in different ways. But what's happening is our democracy and our information in society is based on us being informed. And right now we're in a situation where we can't trust the information that's being put in front of us. And I think we have to broaden the definition a little bit, because we can think about news, the news we consume that comes from a media source, as we understand, or things we scroll through on our phone. But we also have to figure in a lot of other things that we may not think of as carrying information to us that we act on. And that would be memes, that would be ads, that would be other pieces of information that come our way and that we share with other people. And that's really the unfortunate reality we all have to face, is that this disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation is out there. They all have their own way of getting in front of us, but many times we are unknowingly spreading information to further that disinformation, because we think a meme is funny, or we think a particular piece of information we saw supports our own point of view, or something that we emotionally react to and we want to share with someone else. And the danger in that is that when that information starts to affect how we vote, how we make health decisions, how we take action that affects our families or our finances or whatever that may be, all those other things become really relevant to each of us to really care about this topic and to really look for ways we can be more informed about media literacy.
I would just add too, with information technology kind of exacerbating this whole situation, it's so easy to share something and not even to have read it, to just you see the headline or you see the meme and you retweet it or you share it or whatever. You don't even click into the actual thing if it's an article, for instance, that it says. And this is, I think, a lot of reasons that some things go viral is because people aren't even critically engaging with that content. They're just automatically sharing it and going on their way without thinking too much about kind of where it came from, who produced it, what the intent might be behind that.
Excellent, thank you. So our next question kind of leads right in and builds from this conversation that we've already started. But the question is, why is it important for everyday media consumers to critically engage with the media? And I feel like critically is the key word there, right? We engage with media whether we are really aware of it or not. We're bombarded by media messaging everywhere we go. So why is it important for us to critically engage with the media that we consume?
Well, I can start off with that one. I like to make an analogy with our diet. I think all of us would agree that we eat too much junk food. And it is very tempting to think that if I eat junk food, I'm only harming myself. But we now have a lot of evidence that suggests that the junk food diet that we have in the West is literally destroying the planet. So my consumption of junk food is not just harming me, it's harming my community and the globe. By analogy, when I consume junk news, I'm not just harming myself and dumbing myself down. I'm part of a community and I'm spreading that junk around. Now, to go back to diet, it's not enough that I develop a healthy diet. I've got to become an advocate for healthy diet. I have to join a community of people that are as concerned about that as I am. And I have to make the links publicly between diet and what's going on with our planet. Just like with news, it's not enough for me to say, oh, I'll watch this session today and I'll be a little bit more careful about how I consume news. I'm urging all of you to become advocates for healthy news, for news that helps us to become better, more effective citizens and parts of communities. It's not enough to critique the media. It's important that we all become part of the media, interact with it, call it out when it is doing things that represent misinformation or disinformation, so that it's not just a spectator sport, it's being involved. I'll stop there. Thank you.
And I'll jump in then, I guess, from there. So, you hear the term that if you hear something enough and maybe start to believe it, it might be something that's not true, but it was just in front of you so often that you came to understand that that's true. I mean, that's a lot of repetitive, persuasive messaging. Persuasive, I guess it could be, or maybe it's even intentionally meant to make you believe something that's false. And that's true. We need to be responsible and advocate for ourselves and our society, that we can be informed and share the right information with each other and take care of each other, so that the information we share doesn't hurt someone. Like, essentially it could. I think that we have such an ease of sharing it. We're also, I think we should probably recognize, even right now, our society is in a really difficult time. Everything is uncertain for us. We don't know exactly what's going to be happening every day or every week. And we are all more emotional. Our media habits have changed. We're still tuning into social media. We're tuning in more to TV than we have before. We're probably changing our relationships. We might be relying on social media in a way we didn't, because we're a little more separated from people physically. So there's all kinds of forces going on here that almost make us more susceptible to being trigger happy and sharing information with others. And that's, again, coming usually from a place of goodness. Usually it's because we want to share information that we think will help someone, or we feel passionate about a topic. And that can be any topic we're talking about here. There can be misinformation on the big issues we think of right now, like politics and healthcare and COVID, but it has to do with climate change. It has to do with the protests that are happening across our country, all kinds of topics. So I guess you have to be skeptical. You have to be a contrarian pretty much about everything. So the more you can arm yourself with understanding those media sources, the better you are for yourself, your family, your friends, as well as, like Tony was saying, for society.
Is it okay if I add in a perspective here?
Sure.
Okay. From what I've seen and my perspective on where the sources of the reasons why fake news spreads, I think you can boil down to three main things. The least of which I think is intentional malice, where somebody is intentionally trying to spread false information. I think that's like the minority of problems. I think also part of it is poor education and not knowing or learning about what fake news is or how to spot it. But I think the biggest reason why fake news spreads is emotional responses, and we all do it. From people claiming that fake news is fake because it doesn't align with what they already think, or people who see something that they agree with and share it as real news without really looking into it. So I think it's important, like Sara said, to be skeptical, even if you see something that you think is likely to be true. And I think it's important as consumers to take a second before you see a news story and look into it, see if they're sourcing things properly, to make sure that you're projecting accurate information that's not just an emotional reaction. And I think all of this is just made exponentially worse by social media, because false information spreads a lot faster than true information. And if you guys have Netflix, I'd recommend checking The Social Dilemma, that talks a lot about this. But social media, I don't think is 100% to blame. I think a lot of it relies on people's emotional reaction. So I think the seminar is great in helping people train themselves to be skeptical, take a second, and look to see the signs for fake news that are out there.
Yeah, and I think that it's important, the more that you critically engage with information and articles, the more you'll build a habit of mind for when you do see things that maybe do give you an emotional reaction, or play into your own confirmation biases or other biases that you might have. The more that we can just make this a habit, I think hopefully the less susceptible that we can all be in kind of playing into some of these things as well.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, and I would add in that, oftentimes in teaching in women's and gender studies, folks will sort of make an argument that we're in a post-feminist society, that, we no longer need feminism or anti-sexist action. And I would say, like, looking at the news and like just putting on a critical lens to review that would hopefully help folks see that we do in fact still need the feminist movement. We do in fact need advocates for justice and for all forms of anti-oppression. And so I would say, like, another piece of why folks should critically engage with the media is that it will help you see the issues that are happening around you, whether or not you're directly impacted or not. Okay, so our next question, I think, will be the meat of our conversation. And so there is a ton of information being shared through the media right now related to the upcoming election, to current social movements such as Black Lives Matter, coverage of the recent appointment of now Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett and her impact on women's and LGBTQ+ rights, and on COVID-19. So what role have you seen fake news play in the coverage of these topics? And what do you see as the impact of fake news coverage?
Well, I guess I can start again. Excuse me. I would encourage everyone to, you can Google it, a recent article written by Emily Bazelon, Bazelon, in New York Magazine, and it's called The First Amendment in the Age of Disinformation. And one point she makes in that article, which I think is spot on, is that the overriding goal of disinformation on all of these issues that Alicia just mentioned is to basically make us cynical and make us lose our agency and make us think that we can't do anything to impact these issues. So that let's take each one of the issues that was mentioned, the election, the amount of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation is designed to turn us against each other so that we are almost literally supposed to hate our family members who vote differently than us. We're not encouraged to engage our family and friends and colleagues in conversation. We're supposed to be suspicious of each other. And I think that's a profound impact of this bad information out there. On Black Lives Matter, white people, especially white middle-class people, are, through disinformation, basically taught to fear African-American people. Instead of seeing Black liberation as something that lifts up everyone, they are conditioned to think, not everyone, of course, but too many, to think it is somehow a threat to them. On Amy Coney Barrett and the Supreme Court, I find it so distressing that the Supreme Court, that is supposed to be the most radically independent of all the branches of government, has been reduced basically to another partisan branch of government. And I blame all sides of our politics for that. Democrats and Republicans over many years have tried to eliminate the possibility of a judge getting on the bench and being independent. They want to know in advance how that person is going to vote. And I think that disinformation has made too many of us think that that's the way it is or the way it should be, and that we can't do anything to impact change on that. And maybe on COVID-19, the last issue mentioned, maybe this is the most profoundly disturbing in terms of how disinformation has impacted it, because with COVID-19, I make the analogy to what's been going on with global climate change over the years, where disinformation has tried to undermine science and make the fact that 99.9% of climate scientists see the problem, to reduce that as just another opinion, right? And so that what the climate scientists say about what's happening to our globe is the equivalent to, you know, your friend who's got a conspiracy theory. They're equally right or equally wrong. And we've seen that powerfully in COVID-19, where the dramatic failure of our country has been in our leaders not paying attention to the science. And I think they've been able to get away with that, for lack of a better phrase, because of the great amount of disinformation that is spread through social media and other sources, much of which is very, very seductive and on the surface sounds very persuasive. So hopefully after today's session and other assignments and research that you're doing, we'll be better equipped to seek out the truth and information that can help us resolve these issues. Thanks.
I think the question was on like examples of fake news that we've seen that's been spreading. And with my job, the thing that I've been seeing over and over again is this Hunter Biden scandal. And I put that in quotes because the New York Post article that it's based on is just really shoddy. I think somebody's eating chips or something. The reporting in that article is very shoddy. There's not very good evidence, and it's a clear sign to me that people aren't educated enough on what makes like good journalism, because no matter what we try to put in the Journal Sentinel about this scandal, I keep seeing over and over and over again that like the top comments are always people saying, "How come you're not talking about that? How come you're not talking about it like it's real?" And I think that's just like a really, really powerful example of when people are emotionally being attached to the story and just want to see this negative portrayal of Biden, and they see the media as people that are not publishing it because it puts him in a negative light, when that's not really the reality. And that also goes for QAnon and other conspiracy theories as well.
Well, and just to build on that a little bit, so I think a lot of these issues that we're talking about are being used as launching points to have the same players or new players intentionally mislead people with information. So they're just other ways of spreading narratives that are false or misguided. Some people aren't maybe intentionally at that level, but what I'm getting at is there's the obvious ones that you're going to probably start to see more clearly if you get more informed and following like kind of some of those media literacy best practices that we're talking to, and I'm sure we will talk about more. But there's also the ones that are less obvious. And actually, Leo's last point about QAnon is a very good example of that, where I've been in circles of my friends where someone has posted a QAnon message on Facebook, not realizing it's QAnon. QAnon is a conspiracy group that puts forward messages that tend to be right-leaning, kind of anti-Democrats. And they have a campaign like Save the Children that's meant to be about protecting children from human trafficking, and saying that that is up right now because of what's going on with our COVID-19 isolation happening. And that information might be shared as like an image or a meme or a message or a hashtag, and the person sharing it doesn't realize it's QAnon. They're passing along a really good message, like Save the Children. Yes, we're against human trafficking. Yes, we're supporting families. We know there's families in trouble because of the societal issues with COVID-19, for sure. But that's a message from QAnon because it's trying to get you down a road when you don't realize it toward other messaging that will start to gradually change your point of view about other issues besides Save the Children. So just kind of putting out that message too, that some of the ways that we're getting this information communicated to us is not obvious, and we're sharing it thinking it's okay on a surface level because we just don't know.
That's a perfect example, because the Save the Children hashtag isn't just about human trafficking. The conspiracy is about pedophilia and like blood rituals and stuff that most people who are sharing that hashtag probably don't know that that's what they're really talking about. So before you go sharing a hashtag, make sure you know exactly what they're selling.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen a lot of, it's been equal parts fascinating and horrifying, at least as it pertains to COVID, is the type of misinformation I call false context, where you have content that is genuine, it's real content, but it's shared completely like with nothing to do with actually anything that the original article or photo might have been said. One example I can think of is, and this was probably back in mid-March to late March. There was a news item circulating about bioterrorism and how COVID was developed in the lab, and
Oh, Ted, you're muted.
all right, can you hear me again? Okay, so if you don't take the time to actually click through that, you'll see and it's a news item from 2014. Yes, it's from Stanford, and yes, it's about bioterrorism things. I think it was through Iran, but it has to this current content we're in, but it's getting shared. People are just clicking on and not really critically engaging with that. So that's one example I want to share.
Alicia, can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Yeah, on the Hunter Biden story, one part of that has disturbed me. So the story comes out in the New York Post, and Twitter, a private company, ended up locking the New York Post out of their account for several days. Facebook has basically taken anything QAnon related off of Facebook, and I'm concerned now. Twitter, Facebook, other social media platforms, they're not the government. The First Amendment doesn't technically apply to them. They can censor whatever they want. But I am uncomfortable with executives at these private social media companies deciding what I can see and not see. I think we're in a much stronger position if, starting at the lowest possible grades, we do what we're doing now. Educate people how to recognize what is true, what is false, what is exaggerated, what is measured, so that we can all make our own decisions as to what is consumable and what is not. Because my concern is, while I'm sure most of us, if not all of us in this session would say, yes, the QAnon is wacky stuff, I don't feel that bad that someone is censoring it. It's only a matter of time before the censor turns around and decides that your content is wacky and doesn't deserve to be listened to. So that's all I wanted to contribute there.
And Tony, there have been some improvements with, for example, Twitter labeling content as incorrect. Like there were some tweets earlier this month about COVID that were made by our president, who breaks norms and says things that they come from the president. They're said, he can put context around them later, but if it's a statement in a tweet that's not true, it's flagged by Twitter. Do you think that works in flagging it but not removing it from like your feed?
Yeah, I think the flagging it is probably better, but even that, I mean, I'm probably idealistic on this, but I firmly believe that every single American can do what we are doing right now, and that we don't need some gatekeeper out there to tell us what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Now, maybe that is naive, but again, I've studied the history of censorship, and I know that lots of great ideas historically have been censored because someone thought they were dangerous for society. Right? So I'm willing to live with some junk to make sure that the real profound, helpful stuff doesn't get shut out of the marketplace.
And I would agree with that too, in that you know, we don't want our freedom of speech limited. You know, we have protections that I would agree with you on censorship. And honestly, I struggle with the uninformed nature of some of this information that people don't know. I mean, I know people have the ability to know that what they may be forwarding is something that they think is funny or something that they think is important, so it helps somebody be safe. I just don't know what is the way to better reduce the gobs of misinformation that's in front of us. And then also the reality of our media right now is that we're in a position where we can hear what we want to hear. We are in bubbles on social media where we're not in the information open space that we had pre-social media. Now we're walled in with other people who think and content that we like and algorithms that keep feeding us the information on social media that we want to see. And that's limiting that bigger, diverse view and also feeding part of this problem. So just kind of putting that out there too.
So this is a question that isn't on the list, but I'm just curious what your all's thoughts are on the role of like fake news and misinformation and disinformation on, so we've seen like a rise of online harassment especially since the start of COVID. And so I'm wondering like how that all plays, how you see that as playing into one another. And I mean, those are some of the things that get reported as bias incidents on campus. Not only how do they relate, but then how do we respond without, you know, evoking this history of censorship that Tony mentioned, while also keeping our students safe.
Right. I mean, I think I think it's an extremely difficult issue that we all have to acknowledge is not an easy one to solve. My fear is that when we flat out censor the worst material out there, there's a temptation to think that at that moment it goes away. It does not go away. It goes into another space. And so I often feel that we then make it someone else's problem to deal with. I do think the classroom education model is one, being that I'm a professor, I'm comfortable with this one. Especially I teach intro public speaking, and so I'm almost charged with hearing comments that are often ill-informed, somewhat ignorant. And at that moment, as a teacher, I can't just say, you said something ignorant in my class, get out, goodbye. I have to engage people in dialogue. And it's hard, because sometimes people will refuse to acknowledge that what they're saying is deeply hurtful, or that what they're saying has consequences that could lead to other harms. So it's not an easy thing, Alicia, but I do think that if we simply use power, whether it is administrative power or some other power, to just shut it down, we're not solving the problem. And again, my bigger fear is that power then at some point turns around and is aimed at people that are saying enlightening things. I mean, you talked about anti-sexism. Look at historically how many feminists that we now recognize as some of the most profound, important people in the history of the world were shut down and could not state their ideas. So I wish I had an easier answer for this.
I feel like I have to add this because it feels so relevant to something I just watched. I was just watching Fargo, and the TV show, and season 3 is all about the nature of truth and what is agreed to be truth. And I think that season is like so relevant to what's going on now, because truth now seems to be almost subjective at some points. Because in that season, there's this case, and all evidence leads up to the fact that this certain person committed a murder, but that it's not true. And there's this idea of like, a lie is not a lie if you believe it's true. And like, truth gets messy sometimes when it comes to personal perception and what everybody thinks is true. So you're right, it is very difficult sometimes to figure out what is actually objective reality.
I'm kind of thinking like an advertiser now, or in my public relations roles, but these the outcomes that we're seeing in the media often start with campaigns or communication objectives that were part of like an organized campaign. So it's thinking about, well, how can I influence people? Well, they'll believe things they see in the media or maybe on social media because it's coming from what they would perceive as a credible or easy source, or a source they've turned to before. We now have like models of information where influencers are spreading information. So this is like directed and paid peer-to-peer perception of content that you might see from an influencer you follow for sports or fashion or whatever you're interested in. And then you don't realize that messages that influencer is putting out on social media maybe paid, or they may be organized in a way to persuade you. So I sometimes think when we're trying to fight harassment and try to fight for truth, maybe we need to start thinking about, as a society, should we be trying to not necessarily limit the tactics that are already going on, but try to use those tactics ourselves? Like, where is the movement for truth? Where is the movement for an informed society? Like, I don't really see it. I see it in pockets, like in the classroom or in initiatives, like even what the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel is doing right now with Leo's work. Like, they're trying to understand their audience and fight misinformation. And you're seeing that actually the Biden campaign, the Trump campaign, they're doing that too. They have their own ways of fighting any kind of information that's being circulated about their candidate that's not right. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that on behalf of truth? Now, I'm being idealistic, but we're up against a big machine that's putting this information out there, and there's no reason for it to stop. Like we said earlier, the intention behind it is power and money, and that's not going to change really in our landscape anytime soon.
Ted, do you have any thoughts you would like to share?
No, not specifically on this part. No.
Okay. Susan shared in the comments that, and while it might be suggested that there are guidelines to follow, and talking about like engagement with others on social media, people may not perceive their comments as hurtful to someone else. And I think that's a really great point as well of, you know, we put out guidelines, we put out our values and try to get folks to adhere to them, but then, you know, it's left up to interpretation.
I just want to jump in though that you should keep trying. Even though I sounded a little pessimistic about the machine, and I'm sounding really big brother now, I don't mean to. I'm actually a very optimistic and positive person, and that's the perspective I have. So we should keep trying. And I think sometimes bigger changes in society, they start with smaller steps. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of the movements in front of us for fair treatment and you know, Black Lives Matter and advances for different groups that have been held back in previous times. So I think that's happening. So we just have to stay positive and out there.
Yeah, and I've actually seen a lot of different activist organizations hosting media literacy sessions to combat the misinformation and disinformation that's happening and the malinformation. And so I thought that was really interesting. And actually, I got the idea for this panel because I was in a training this summer for a group of organizers, and one of the sessions was on like misinformation and disinformation. And you know, for me, I was like, I never really got that training. And so I wanted to bring that to students. And now we've been working with TED to get some media literacy resources on the Polk Library website. And, you know, the pipe dream is to maybe create some sort of peer education model for media literacy. And so, you know, we'll start the movement for truth. Can start it right here at UWO. Well, until that time, let's talk about some strategies that folks can implement as they're engaging with the media. So what questions can people ask when they're evaluating media sources and content, and how can people improve their media literacy skills?
Sure, I can start with that a little bit. I mean, I think some of the prevailing takeaways from this is it's not always easy, right? And we all have to like kind of do our part and not take everything at face value. And some things you can start with when you're engaging with a source, looking at the authorship. Who is the person that wrote up that particular article? What is their expertise? What is their credentials? What do they have in their background, whether it's journalism or something with a more advanced degree? What gives them that expertise to talk credibly about that information in that article? So focusing in on the author is an important one. Taking a look at where they're getting their information from as well. And that can be hard. I work with classes all the time where even sites that end up being not great sites, they might use credible links, but they misrepresent the information that's contained in there. So following those source links, reading through those yourself, seeing, is this being taken out of context? If they don't have any links to anything, are they using signal phrases to kind of talk about who they interviewed and where they got their information from? So doing as much due diligence about where they obtained their information from as well is important. And then we've mentioned this a little bit, but making sure that you don't have a gut reaction to everything. Take a step back, stop, breathe, think things through, think about the purpose of that particular site too. Is it there to inform you, or is it trying to do something else as well? So those are three big ones. I alluded to this a little earlier as well. Date is a very important thing when looking through stuff. When was the stuff actually published? Is it actually something that was published pretty recently, or is this something that's older and again being taken out of context or used in a way that doesn't really get at what that particular source is purporting to be. So those are just a few of my thoughts that I have. With that, I can step aside and let other people chime in as well.
Yeah, I won't repeat back Ted's outstanding suggestions. Those are all great. So let me just say two additional things. One, a lot of the misinformation these days, and this was said before, are sharing visual images that may be out of context. There's a really good website that all the students should be familiar with. It's called tineye.com, tineye.com. And on that site, you can do what's called a reverse image search. So before you share an image or spread it on, see where it comes from and is it really authentic. Black Lives Matter especially has been such a victim of weaponized imagery, in part by people forwarding on completely false, out of context images. And the other thing I would want to say is back in the 80s and 90s, there was a punk rock star, Jello Biafra, from the Dead Kennedys. And he came out with one of my all-time favorite quotes back then, which was, "Don't hate the media, become the media." So for the students watching and listening, I urge you to become the media. Don't just complain about the Advanced Titan. Write for the Advanced Titan. Submit a letter to the Advanced Titan. We have a campus radio station, WRST, which does news. Everyone is free to be involved. We have a campus television station, Titan TV. Every student is free to be involved. Support and become part of local journalism. My favorite is the Oshkosh Examiner, oshkoshexaminer.com, which is produced by Dr. Miles McGuire, retired professor of journalism. It's outstanding. We have the Oshkosh Independent, the Oshkosh Herald. Support independent sources of journalism. And again, as Jello Biafra said, don't hate the media, become the media. And if I'm really confident that if we all could find our voice, we could drown out the bad stuff with good stuff. But we can only do that if we stop being spectators and start being more involved. Thank you for listening.
I feel like I have to add that a lot of journalists cringe whenever they hear the term the media, because the media isn't like a homogenous group. The media is made out of individuals who are fallible and make mistakes. So it's important to keep in mind that even if an article is coming from something reputable like the New York Times, there could still be errors there. And if it's coming from a source that's dubious, it could still be correct. But it's always good to double check things. So that's just one thing I wanted to add.
And I'll just build on all this. I mean, Ted gave a really good foundation, and it's good we can all kind of add a few more things on there. One thing that Ted said was talking about emotion. So just be tuned into that. Like if something sounds really, really good or really, really scary or really sensational, kind of thinking about sensational news, or things that you may, again, see in a meme or just a short article that you only read the headline and maybe the first sentence, and then you forward it on to people and share that. You're responsible. You became part of the media, whatever we're defining the media as, when you shared it, because you're becoming an information source. You're putting that information out in front of someone else. So really be thoughtful about that. Be thoughtful about what is someone trying to do and getting me to have this emotion. You all probably are familiar with clickbait, right? It's stuff you want to click on and know more about. Why? So have some thoughts about that. And then another one is a lot of the students that are tuning in for this you're from what we'd call Gen Z. Your generation is known for certain qualities, and one of them is you're really good at filtering information. You have to. Your generation has been more inundated with electronic media than any. And that's great because you're good at that. You're good at filtering and getting through things on your social media or even other ways that it's coming to you. The important thing is that filtering doesn't allow for you to dive deep into knowing like who the source is, what is that information, taking some time to think. So maybe think about that a little bit more as you're taking in information and sharing. And then just one other piece is there's a lot of great information you can get from watching the international media, like checking into Reuters or some other international news sources that can give you a different perspective on things happening in our country. And I really encourage you, if you get that opportunity, to try to search for news that way as well.
Thank you. So I just put in the chat some key questions to ask when analyzing media messages, and this is from the Media Literacy Week website, which I also linked at the bottom, so you can follow the source. And so we have a couple of questions here, if we could answer them. So is there a website that will help us dispel the lies? Susan uses Snopes, but are there other ones or better ones?
There's a few that I have at the last slide of my quiz that people can check out. Google just came out with a fact-checking program. I forgot what's called. It'll be at the end of the quiz though, but Snopes is a good one, and PolitiFact is pretty reliable when it comes to political statements.
I would also add to that factcheck.org and flakcheck.org, which I believe is the Annenberg Policy Institute. They have very good coverage of both political claims and also just news stories as well. You can use both. You can use both of those. A couple other things, and this is on the web page that I developed in partnership with Alicia. Allsides.com is a very good one as well, just to kind of get a sense of, all right, for a particular news item that might be going on right now, what is every side, what is every media site across the political spectrum saying about this particular thing? So they don't necessarily analyze it for its fact worthiness or whatever, but they're kind of aggregating and saying, okay, this is what these different sites are saying on this particular issue. And that can be very instructive as well to kind of get a sense of different sites and how they approach particular news items or stories or other movements.
All right, and then another question we have before we move into the Kahoot is, what are your all's thoughts on the personalized suggestions based on location on search engines like Google, which encourage and allow people to easily fall into a conspiracy rabbit hole?
Well, this is an important point, and it's vital to recognize that when you're online, you're often communicating with an algorithm, right? There's a temptation to think that you're always in communion with other human beings, and that's not necessarily the way these platforms work. I would encourage everyone to go to YouTube and search for a video called The Miseducation of Dylan Roof, because it demonstrates what happens when the search engine is corrupted. So Dylan Roof, the young man who horribly massacred, I think, 9 African Americans in a church in South Carolina. Part of what led him astray was that he did a simple search on the issue of black on white crime, and he was led to neo-Nazi, white nationalist, and other hate sites. And the Southern Poverty Law Center and other organizations have been working for years now to try to get Google to fix, if you will, their algorithm so that it will only lead people to more reliable sources of information on tactics like that. That video, Education of Dylan Roof, because it gets at this topic in a very disturbing way.
I think it's really important for people to educate themselves on how social media and other websites manipulate you and show you bubbled information, if you will. This, again, the Social Dilemma documentary talks about this, but like if you type in the Google search bar, is global warming, depending on where you live, the suggested search might be, is global warming real or is global warming a hoax? and it can really change the perspective of things. One thing you can do to help combat that is get a VPN, a virtual private network, and you could set it to different countries and stuff and just play around with that. Or you can use incognito mode. That might help as well. But it is tough to get around that sometimes, though.
Yeah, algorithms just in general, they're opaque. You don't know exactly what is getting inputted into there that leads you to particular suggestions or sites. So always bear that in mind. And Google might have started out their company with the do no harm or whatever it was, but they're in the business of making money, and I don't think that they're likely to change their algorithms all too soon if it's going to benefit them. So just bear that in mind as well.
I'm going to put a book title in the chat. It's called The Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism. So that's another good resource, especially if folks want to add it to their maybe post-semester reading list.
Yeah, I would put that in the must-reading category. That's really a fantastic book.
Awesome. Any last thoughts or comments from the panelists before we move to Kahoot?
This is just a little bit of frame of reference. Like when we talk about the problems with the algorithm and the lack of interest for the powerful companies that manage our information or what we see, we have to remember Facebook is going to, I think, made $70 billion last year. And Google made about twice that. I think I had it somewhere here. Yeah, 140 billion last year. That's because their models work. They're very profitable. And when you see questions about who should have the power over our information, being talked about when, in Washington, where our political leaders are asking, you should be tuned into that. I know sometimes that's not very interesting to us, but these mechanisms are what is allowing the information to be coming to us the way that it is. And until something changes in media ownership, we're going to have this same situation for quite some time. But stay positive and keep trying to fight for truth.
Any last words, Tony or Ted?
I just once again would urge people to become advocates for good media and seek out people that share your concerns. And when we get together in small groups, we can be really powerful to become change agents. We can't just do it alone behind our computer screens.
Yeah, I would just add, you guys can do it, and we're all here to help you. I think anybody, any instructor on campus or librarian or whatever, there are plenty of people out there that are willing to help you get through this and also be able to do it on your own eventually. So even if it seems in this hour like overwhelming and oh my gosh, we talked about so much stuff and how can I do that? It's okay. We can get through this. So
the big thing I would say is just be skeptical about everything. A healthy amount of skepticism is good for everybody. So be skeptical in your thinking.
Awesome. All right. So thank you to our panelists for sharing your wisdom with us. And you are very welcome to stay and play. See if you can beat out the rest of us. All right, Leo.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Oh, whoops. Hang on. Okay, can you guys see the quiz here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is it big enough where you can read the whole thing? I just want to check.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the pin is there, and I'm waiting for players to join here. I'll just wait a minute or two here. Just go to kahoot.it if you haven't done this before on your phone or on your browser and type in this pin here. I think there's a total of 20 questions, so it shouldn't take too long. And if any of the presenters want to chime in on the answers, if you have an objection to what the answer is, or if you want to add something, feel free to just jump in and say something. I didn't come up with this quiz. This is put together by the Society of Professional Journalists Florida chapter. Somebody who works for Harkin, the company that runs the fellowship program I'm in. They're based in Florida, so that's why it's from Florida. All right, we have 14 people here so far. So one thing to note is that you're going to have 30 seconds for each one, and ideally you would read everything that's on there. You're not going to have a lot of time to really decide if it's fake news or not, but I think this is a good exercise to kind of sharpen your skills and look for the key things to look for when looking at news sources here. All right, I think I'm just going to wait till 10 seconds goes by without somebody joining in here. We're at 16 right now. All right, I think that's about it. Somebody's named Newsies. I like that. That's good. Okay, I think we're going to start here. So, whoops, round one. So, if you think it's real, vote real. If you think it's fake, vote fake. All right, here's the first one. I'm going to start it in just a second here. All right, this one is fake. So it does look real at first glance, but this is not an official Twitter account for BBC. BBC News Tonight is actually not even there anymore. I checked it. There's no blue check mark, which normally a news site like BBC would have. Also, this link just links to the BBC website. It's just there to try to get clicks. If this was actually an article, you'd probably see Daniel Radcliffe's face here or something. But that's, I think, a perfect example of how you can easily be manipulated. All right, here's the next one. All right, this one is real. It may seem a little silly at first, but there's a proper byline and date here. It's well written. There's a source according to a security researcher, Elliot Alderson, so you could actually look that up. And there's a pretty reliable looking image here. And looks like most people got that one right, so that's good. All right, here's the next one. All right, hey, everyone got this one right. This one is fake. W24 News doesn't seem like a reliable source here. That's a pretty unprofessional font. There's no byline here, so we don't know who wrote this. So it's pretty dubious here. I forgot to note that there is a sorta option. You guys might have noticed that there are only 2 answers that are sorted. So I'll just keep that in mind, because there is some gray area sometimes, which we'll see. I'm not sure if it's the next one or not. That wasn't a clue. All right, here we go. All right, this one is fake. You can see words like phony, garbage. These are just really unprofessional written words. It's just not really well written. Like there's some opinion in the wording here. Also, Daily Newsbin is not like a reliable head byline. So those are some key factors for some fake news. All right, here's the next one. All right, this one is one of the sorted ones. So this is a real reporter. This is a verifiable source, but the information that's being claimed here is not properly sourced. There's no link. They're not saying where they got the information from. So that's a good example of where there's some gray area. All right, next one. All right, mostly everybody got this one right. This one is fake. There's no byline here. It would normally an article like this would say where in North Carolina this is taking place. So you're going to see time and time again, byline is like a big factor here. If there's no byline, it's difficult to take seriously. All right, here's the next one. All right, people were pretty split on this one. This one is fake. First of all, Deborah Messing is a actress, so she's not really a reliable source for political information. This is a really great example of how it could be easy to be victim to confirmation bias, especially if you're anti-Trump, because you might like Deborah Messing and see this and believe it's true. And WhiteHouseGiftShop.com is a real website, but the information that's in here is actually photoshopped. So, yeah, there's that one. Okay, here's the next one. And in this one here, you're looking at this here. This is what's being, this is the post that's being shared, but this is who's actually posting it here. It might be a little confusing, but here we go. I think somebody's mic is on, so unless you have a question or something, just make sure you're muted. Okay, this one is fake. This is a real person, but this is not their official handle here, especially because you can see the word urgent is in the name. Also, like, the information doesn't quite make a lot of sense, and a tweet on its own isn't proof. So that one's pretty dubious. Okay, here's the next one. Okay, people were pretty split on this one. This one is another sort of one, because the information in here is true. They do provide a good amount of photos, but it's mostly just screenshots, no actual links, and it's not from a verified checkmark source. I'm not sure who Kyle Moore is, but it is information that you can look up and verify yourself. So if this is how you would have first seen this story, it would be important to double check that against other news sources first, even if the evidence is compelling. So this is a great example of how you should be suspicious, even if it looks like something that's very true. Okay, again, you're going to be wanting to look here for this one. Okay, this one is fake. Again, not a verified news source here. And this information was actually debunked by Snopes, which is one of those fact-checking websites we were talking about earlier. So take non-news sources with a grain of salt. All right, next one. Okay, this one here is fake. There's no date line. Oh, actually, the person who made this, I think, got this wrong because there's a date line up here. But this DC polls isn't like a real byline. To be honest, I'm not sure why this name is highlighted. Maybe it's not a real person. I'm not sure. But again, this information isn't really sourced. So this is a fake one. Keep an eye on those bylines. All right, next one. All right, almost everybody got this one right, which is good. This might be one that we would wish is fake, but unfortunately it's real. There's a proper byline, proper date. KATV is a real channel out of Little Rock, and the photo is also properly cited as well. Good job, everyone. Okay, round two. Oh, actually, let's see who's doing the best here. All right, first place is Newsies, followed by Alicia, then TP. So round two is going to get a little bit more difficult. You're going to have 4 options here. So I'm going to give you 2 different pieces of news, and you have to click which one is fake. Not which one is real. You have to click on which one is fake. You can say either left, right, both, or neither. All right, here's the first one. All right, this one should have been pretty easy, and most people got it. Left one is fake. There's no byline. This is actually from The Onion, which is a satirical website. This one is real. CNN is obviously a real news source, and there's a headshot with a photo, which is always good, and the photo is captioned properly. Okay, here we go. This is a tough one. I had difficulty took it as well. The one on the right is fake. Mostly this image just is kind of vague, and it's not really sourced properly, although there is a name and a date. I can understand why a lot of people would get this one wrong. This might have been one of those sort of ones, just because it does look real. But the one on the left is real because this is, I think the point of this one is just to show how specificity in photos can be important as well, because this is just kind of a stock image. All right, next one. All right, everyone got this one right. The one on the left is fake. You have this spooky deep state fan fiction here, another cheating, there's a lot of red flags here. Here you have headshots, which is a good sign. You have 2 different writers, a link source, a name. Like, this is top notch right here. All right, everyone got this one right. These are both fake. These are both non-sources. Who are these people? Also, none of them really cite the source for any of these, and this image is photoshopped. All right, people were pretty split on this one, it looks like. The one on the left here is fake. This one is properly has a proper date line and a byline. This one does not. And in my opinion, this is a pretty unprofessional and out of taste photo. All right, next one. There's 3 left, including this one. All right, I think most people got this one right. Yeah, these are both fake. This one here, this is not Judge Joe Brown's official Twitter account. Also, this is a photoshopped birth certificate image. It's something that's very easy to do. I'm not sure if you can read this, but it says Caucasian here, and I believe birth certificates usually would say white in that scenario. And this looks like an official Twitter page. It's verified, but Jacob Wall is a suspended troll. He's no longer on Twitter, I believe. All right, most people got this one right as well, I believe. They are both real. They both have good bylines and date lines. This one even has 1, 2, 3, 4 different writers. And this one has a really nice photo caption here. This is really professional. All right, last one. All right, I'm actually surprised people were split on this one. This one can be actually kind of tough, actually. So the one on the left is real. The one on the right is fake. Although this may seem like something the president would tweet, it is not from him. And this is something that you can actually look up. And even if he's deleted tweets, there are websites where you can fish up old deleted tweets. And personally, I think he usually doesn't state his emotions. He usually says sad, not I am feeling sad or anything like that. Another subtle thing is that when tweets are shared, this font is a little bit too big, especially if you compare it to here. And this is something that he actually wrote. This is something you can go and find yourself. And that about wraps it up. Let's see who won here. All right, 3rd place is TP. 2nd place is Alicia. And 1st place goes to Newsies. Good job, Newsies. Clever name, and you deserve it. Okay, so here are some reliable fact checkers. Some were mentioned earlier. There's some trusted news sources here. Nonprofit fact checkers like factcheck.org, Pointer, and Snopes.com. And the new one that I was mentioning earlier is Google Fact Check Explorer. And that wraps it up. Thank you for playing.
Thank you so much, Leo, for facilitating that for us. That was fun.
Yeah, I hope it went smoothly here.
Yeah, and I think it definitely challenged us, and I mean, I know I was challenged to look at the different news sources, and so I think that's great practice. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank our panelists again, Dr. Palmeri, Dr. Hansen, and Ted. Please feel free to reach out. You can contact the Women's Center and we can help get you connected to the individual panelists if you would like. And stay tuned for more information on additional media literacy training opportunities. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great night.